Okay, was having some technical difficulties here. Just give me a moment till I get everything straightened out, hopefully. If I don't, well, I don't. Okay, looks like I'm all right. Just give me a second here till I leave a message. Okay. Sorry for the delay, folks, but, you know, that's just the way things go sometimes when it comes to live streaming and things like that. I couldn't, for some reason, it wasn't going live, but I had to basically reboot my computer, and I think I got everything going right now. So I think we're going to be all right. So let's just give it a couple minutes till people could find the, for people to find the live stream, because obviously I had some technical difficulties. So we'll give it a minute or two until some people could find it, and then we will begin. Yes. Okay, welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today, we're going to talk about basically cattle, black helicopters, UFOs, aliens. Now, some of these things I have talked about in the past several times, multiple times, actually, many times. But today, I want to talk about some other aspects about it, and I also want to go through an article here with everybody. So. Hopefully, it's going to be pretty interesting. Anyway, first off, the one thing I have received one complaint so far, and this was from a person who saw the thumbnail that I was using for this video, and this person did not like it. Let me just pull it up here quick. So we could just, I'll respond to that. The person thought it wasn't classy. So let me just dig that up quick here, and then we'll talk about that for a second, and then we will roll forward. Yes. Now, the thumbnail that I used for this video, let me just shrink myself so everybody could see it, was this. I actually made this today using different images, but it wasn't meant to be funny or not classy, but it was taken that way by one of my followers, and this is what he said. This is from Danlit. It says, "Bro, they make fun of us for photos like this. I respect you as a content creator too much to not give criticism. We're dealing with the government here, man. We got to be classy and cool in the way we present ourselves." Well, I mean, I don't know what's not classy about it. I mean, I guess we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this one. But I mean, it wasn't a silly image. I mean, there's a lot of silly images out there of cows getting abducted, or a UFO hovering over them, and they're very silly. I didn't think that this was silly, but I just thought it represents the everything I was planning on talking about today. So with that in mind, I think it's okay, but I could understand maybe some people might think it's maybe they think it's goofy, I guess, and that's the way, what am I going to do? There's nothing I can do about that. I mean, that's, sometimes not everybody's going to agree with everything that I put out there, and I guess obviously this image that I used is something that people aren't going to agree with either. Anyway, talk about you know, I've talked about before many times in the past about cattle mutilations and what my feeling is with regard to that. The strange kind of mutilations that, and we're going to get into all of that again. But I actually have a different kind of theory I would like to talk about tonight as well. So, and we're going to get into all of that. But anyway, so first off, I want to read an article here. The headline is "Mysterious Mutilations: Who or What is Killing These Cattle?" It's from the High Plains Journal, and of course I will leave a link in the description later on so you guys can check it out for yourself. But this was an interesting article, so let's go through it. And this was actually published last year, by the way. This was in December 27th, 2022, so this article is not that old. And just to point out, too, that last year in Colorado there were some unsolved cattle mutilations. But I think a lot of us understand, what's behind these cattle mutilations. I mean, it's obviously, I know there's a lot of people had different kinds of theories over the year, but it seems apparent after decades, after all, at least since 1967, since the first popular case, was actually a horse, it wasn't a cow. Snippy back in 1967, I believe, was the first well-known case of this, where this horse was mutilated, and in a very it was all strange. Nobody had any answers for it, and then throughout the 70s into the 80s, it became a very big thing. Researchers like Linda Moulton Howe, she's probably the foremost expert on this, and she believes it's aliens, and I actually believe that too. I think a lot of these cases it's aliens. But anyway, let's go through this article and talk about it. It says it was the mid-1990s when Eli Ronick of Raton, New Mexico first stumbled... Let me shrink myself here a little bit first so we can see the article a little bit better. It was the mid-1990s when Eli Ronick of Raton, New Mexico first stumbled upon a dead calf with its tongue, eyes, and reproductive organs removed and completely devoid of blood. This haunting scene would become one he would discover another 40 times over the next 30 years, with the most recent death occurring in 2022. And well, let's just stop there for a second. Obviously, as you can see, this phenomenon is still occurring with regularity. It's never stopped. It's been going on for decades, and a lot of people, I believe, actually aren't even reporting this because they don't want to be laughed at. Continuing, he is now in his 70s and has been ranching his entire life, and says these cattle mutilations are unlike any other deaths he has seen. When you find one, you know what it is immediately, Horonic said. People will try to play it down as a natural death or coyotes, but it's completely different. Horonic's experience with these unexplained deaths is not unlike the thousands of other reports made by ranchers over the last 50 years. Mutilated cattle are often found missing body parts of no commercial value, such as ears, tongues, udders, brains, eyes, or reproductive organs, and there are no teeth marks. These animals have been sliced with what some call surgical precision. Sometimes their bodies are drained of blood, bones are broken, scavengers avoid the carcasses, and a medicinal smell is reported at some kill sites. Additionally, some animals have been found to have strange substances in their blood, such as barbiturates, mescaline, anticoagulants, and potassium cyanide. Oftentimes, there are no tracks around the animals, even from the bovine itself, and strange lights or helicopters are frequently reported by witnesses. It sounds like an episode of the X-Files, but for the ranchers and investigators who experience these scenes, it is all too real. Chris O'Brien, noted cattle mutilation investigator and author of several books on the topic, said cattle mutilations hit a peak in the 1970s. At its height in October 1975, there were 8 different states that reported mutilations in the same time frame, O'Brien explained. In Colorado, Governor Richard Lamb called it the greatest outrage in the history of Western cattle raising. Mutilations have been reported across the United States and the world for decades, but O'Brien said the Rocky Mountain states, including Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, have seen the highest number of cases. Other states with numerous reports include Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, and Texas. But now the epicenter seems to be migrating to Oregon, where 21 cases have been reported in the last 6 years. Let me just stop there for a second. I think, this, of course, it just doesn't just happen here. There's other places in the world where this happens, but it seems like it does happen a lot in these states, more so than usual. And you have to understand, too, I would imagine there are many people who just aren't reporting these things. I think these things, when they happen, it's like, what's the point in reporting them? Because then people are just going to, then they'll be concerned about the stigma that associates with this topic, because then people will think, oh, you believe in UFOs and things like that, then you must be crazy. So then, some ranchers won't even say anything about it. So I think it's actually a lot more than what's been reported. O'Brien estimates, and I actually think it gets into this here. It says O'Brien estimates 10,000 mutilations have been reported in total, but he believes that figure is conservative in comparison to the number of actual mutilations. He ventures a guess that only about 1 in 10 are actually reported. Well, that's pretty big number. That's a pretty big number. If only 1 in 10 is reported, well, that tells you everything you need to know. He believes the stranger the case, the less likely it is to be reported. And I would imagine that would definitely be true. Anyway, continuing, O'Brien became fascinated with these mutilation cases in the early 1990s when he was living in Colorado's San Luis Valley, a hotspot for mutilation cases. He said he has been involved in the investigation of 200 cases, working closely with the police. And he says, I was very intrigued by it because these are the only blood-based mysterious serial events, and they leave behind thousands of pounds of physical evidence, he said. The more I started researching and digging into it, the more I was compelled to try to figure it out. But the more you know about this stuff, the less sense it makes and the more confusing it becomes. Well, let me just say here that I don't think there's really anything confusing about it. I mean, I think it's very, very clear at this point what's been happening over these years, all these years. We play this. We're all mystified by it. Oh, look at this. The blood's drained. It's missing all these body parts. They were removed surgically, but looks like by laser with lasers somehow. There's UFO seen about it, but we still don't know what's going on. I think we do know what's going on. I think it's very clear as far as I'm concerned of what's going on. It looks very clear what's going on. Anyway, continuing. One case that sticks out to O'Brien as particularly bizarre was a mutilation he investigated in March 1998 in Colorado. A rancher found a young calf that was missing its right front leg. Its spine was removed from the neck to the hips, and the brain was removed with no break into the cranium. It also had a slight medicinal odor. O'Brien said 2 separate witnesses made reports of strange lights in the area on the night the animal was killed. He even consulted a veterinarian who said he could not explain what happened to the calf. And here O'Brien says, there was absolutely no blood, and the heart and liver were expertly excised but left in the body cavity. That's the first thing scavengers would go after, but no birds or animals would go near it. We noticed the spine had been taken out in an upwards manner, and because of the way the cut was performed on the front leg, it would have been impossible to remove the spine that way. To me, that was a truly paranormal case. David Perkins, a reporter and author, stumbled upon these mysterious mutilations in the mid-1970s when he became a suspect in a case in Colorado's Herfano Valley. Perkins was new to the area and called the sheriff when he found a dead cow with its rectum carved out in a perfect circle, udders cut off, the bottom part of the jaw missing, and one eye and ear removed. Eventually, the sheriff cleared Perkins as a suspect, and the two developed a partnership in investigating mutilations. He has examined 60 mutilations in various stages of decomposition over the last 50 years. Now, let's just stop there. So, I mean, back then, okay, some guy reports to the cops about this cow that's mysteriously mutilated, and the cop suspects him. Wow. Anyway, continuing. Perkins stated, in the beginning, I said I'm not going to give up on solving this because I know there is something really important behind this. That's my intuition, gut feeling, and every cell in my body tells me that. Perkins said the strangest case he has examined happened near Dulce, New Mexico in 1978. He said both he and the police agreed it looked like this cow had been dropped from a great height. It was basically splattered and splayed out, Perkins said. It appeared its back leg was broken and it looked like it had fallen on its side, and one horn was sort of driven back into its skull like it fell with great force. There were little specks of blood on its hooves like it had fallen through a mist of blood, and it had clamp marks on the backs of its ankles like it had been held up by something. Okay, let's just stop here for a second. Now, obviously, why would anybody else? Well, who could be doing this? Now, some people will say, "Well, the government's doing it, right?" No, no. Why would the government be doing this? If the government wanted to do something like this, right? If they wanted to, drain blood out of cattle and cut out all their parts and stuff like that, they would actually just go out and buy the cows themselves and not and do it in some laboratory somewhere, not under the covertly in the black of night, stealing them off a rancher's property. I don't see that happening. Anyway, continuing, it says, but what do the veterinarians have to say about these events? Perkins said veterinarians are in a complicated position when it comes to these cases. Here's what he said. He said there's a certain stigma associated with this stuff. The vets have tried to stay away from it because this is a lose-lose for them. They can't really come up with an answer, and if they verify it, they're suspect. They don't really have a lot to gain by going out and identifying a true mutilation. See, let's just stop here again. See, again, I mean, we all know what's going on here. I mean, it's obvious after all this time. Okay, maybe when it first started happening in the 60s and the 70s, right? Okay, yeah, we don't know what's going on. But, after all this time and all the reports and the UFO sightings that accompany a lot of these cases, right? I think it's pretty obvious what's going on. But again, we don't want to efface it as the human race for some reason, the public, the media, nobody wants to face the reality of what's going on here. There's some non-human entity, non-human intelligence obviously responsible for these things. And they're doing it with craft that could outperform anything that we have, and obviously technology that could outperform anything we have. I mean, so a lot of times these things happen real fast. I mean, they happen, with a rancher will see a certain cow, and then a half hour later, in broad daylight sometimes there's been cases like this. A half hour later, an hour later, the cow that was healthy just an hour before, all of a sudden is completely drained of blood and it's missing a whole bunch of body parts. I mean, there's no other explanation. It's obviously it's extraterrestrial. Anyway, continuing. Perkins has been working with O'Brien to collect reports that are extremely thorough and verified by ranchers, law enforcement, and veterinarians, and demonstrate cases that are not natural predations. And then we get into who or what is the culprit. Well, we already know what the culprit is, but let's see what these guys say. It says, possible explanations for these mutilations fall into several categories. Many believe they are either due to predators, wrong. Government experiments, wrong. Satanic cults, bzz, nope. Or extraterrestrials, ding, 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 ding. Now, putting those four in the same sentence is shocking, but so are the nature of these deaths. I don't see what's so shocking about it. I mean, really, what's so shocking about an extraterrestrial presence on this planet? What's so shocking about it? Really? I mean, we're here. We exist. I mean, what's so shocking about it? Right? Really? I mean, I don't get it. At this point, I don't get it. Like, what's there to be shocked about anymore? Right? I mean, after the piles and piles of evidence that we have that have accumulated over the years. I mean, I feel like a broken record. I know I say this a lot. But what is so shocking about it? I mean, look at all the stars in the sky. We know how big the universe is, how many galaxies there are, the billions and trillions. We don't even know really exactly. There's just so much possibilities for life from other places to have developed. I mean, it's insane. So, I mean, it shouldn't be shocking to think that's what's going on here, because that's what it is. It is what's going on here. There is no other explanation. It's not predators. It's not satanic cults. That's absolutely absurd. Anyway, let's continue here. It says, they say when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. Therefore, many believe there is no conspiracy or culprit to pursue in these cases. Additionally, O'Brien, Perkins, and other experts are quick to admit many cases are merely due to scavenger activity. And here's a quote from O'Brien. It says, out of the 200 cases I've investigated, about 20% of them were highly unusual, O'Brien said. Let me just stop there. He's a guy who's been investigating this for many years now, for decades, and 20% of them are highly unusual. I think that tells you something. Of those, about 8 or 9 were unexplainable. Okay, those in the non-conspiracy camp believe the missing body parts in these cases could be the result of... Okay, let's see. For 1 second. Okay, now this is put the wrong way. Those in the non-conspiracy camp believe the missing body parts in these cases could be the result of dehydration or scavenger activity. Non-conspiracy. I don't think this is a conspiracy. Well, really, it's not. I mean, extraterrestrials, I think it's basically natural. If they're coming and taking cattle in the middle of the night, they're just, they're I mean, in a way, they're no different than predators, really. I mean, there's nothing. Again, there should be nothing shocking about the reality that there's an extraterrestrial presence here, and that they do things like this. It's almost the same thing as saying, yeah, some coyotes came last night and killed a couple of cows on my ranch, or oh yeah, obviously some extraterrestrials. What are you gonna do? That's how we should be talking about this, because that's what it is. It's extraterrestrial, and why they're doing that, we'll get into that later. After all, insects often target soft tissue. Another less macabre rationalization for the absence of blood is these deaths could be that the blood was either consumed by scavengers, absorbed into the ground, or evaporated. Let's just stop there for a second. Linda Moulton Howe did research this longer than anybody and more intensely than anybody, and she would say no to this. A lot of these cases, the blood is gone and there's absolutely zero trace. It just didn't absorb into the ground, and there was not one speck of it anywhere. The blood in a lot of these cases was completely removed somehow, like by some machine, apparently. Okay, it says, mutilation skeptics often point to bloating after death as an answer to the precise incisions. Bloating can cause skin to stretch, and dehydration can result in cow hide shrinking and splitting. No, that's wrong. That's totally wrong. That's not the way it is. I mean, obviously, there's been different people that have looked at this throughout the years, and it's been basically proven that these were used, some sort of a laser was used to make these incisions. So this is wrong. Anyway, continuing. It says, one of the major reasons the government is often suggested as a responsible party for mutilations is that hundreds of helicopter sightings that have been reported around mutilation sites and the military claims they have no flight records for most of the reports. And then O'Brien says, I estimate about 15% of the cases we have on record have helicopter involvement. Okay, let's just stop and talk about the helicopters and why they are there and why I think they are there. Basically what I think is happening here is the helicopters are, to me, right? I mean, the government's obviously coming in on the tail end of these cases, these events a lot of the times. That's what's going on. I mean, it's just like, let's talk about UFO cases, just regular, mundane UFO cases, everyday UFO cases. There's a whole bunch of people at a lake and they're watching UFOs, right? Next thing you know, they hear some jets coming, the UFOs take off and they see some fighter jets flying by, right? Because apparently sometimes these things are obviously picked up on radar, and the military sends out, jet fighters to investigate. They know what's going on. Obviously, what I think is happening here is the same thing with these cattle mutilations. Obviously, they must be, they know that there's some UFOs in a specific area, and they know it's probably going to be cattle mutilations. So they send out a team, probably a team that's under the auspices of the secret control group, right? Helicopters, black helicopters, so nobody could identify them because it's a top secret kind of group, and they're going out there to try to dig up information on it. That's what that is. That's what's going on with that. So, I mean, I think that's the reason that for these helicopters are obviously military, and they're not going to admit this. The military won't admit this because obviously a lot of people in the Pentagon probably don't even know about it. They're probably not authorized to know about it. It's probably all these helicopters must be controlled by the secret control group, Majestic 12, whatever it's called, who knows? But there has to be some kind of secret control group that's looking into this and studying it and everything. So obviously that's what it is. So people see a helicopter flying around, and that's because they probably picked something up on radar, and they're trying to go in there. Maybe they're trying to just scare them away, just like they do when the jet fighters show up in different regular UFO cases. I mean, it's probably the same thing, and they probably realize the government. The secret control group certainly must realize, okay, looks like they're at it again. They're going after some cows. Let's go out and see if there's something we can do. And by the time they get there, the UFOs take off. I mean, that's what I think is going on anyway. Anyway, continuing with this article, it says, some point to satanic cults as the guilty party in these mutilations, which is partly due to the satanic panic of the 1980s. Many crimes in the 80s were blamed on satanic cults, but the majority of those accusations proved to be false. Yeah, actually, nobody ever caught any satanic cult mutilating cattle. It's never happened. I mean, if this was the case, right, we would have caught them. The cops would have caught somebody by now, some cult members by this point. But it's just it's just, to me, this is more ridiculous than the extraterrestrial explanation. I just don't see this happening. It's just absurd to me. Satanic cults, that they would go out and do something like this. I just, and because they would have, for one thing, if they were doing it, somebody would have been caught by this point. If it was actual regular people going out as part of some cult, right? They would have been busted. Somebody would have been busted by this point. That, to me, that's absolutely absurd. Another contributing factor was the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives report, which surmised that devil worshippers were committing the mutilations, although there has never been evidence to support that claim. Yeah, of course there's no evidence, because it's not them. It's not them. I mean, again, there's UFOs that are sighted. I mean, what are these satanic cultists flying around and flying saucers? Where did they get them at? It is also hard to imagine cultists wrangling 1,400-pound animals with no noise or footprints left behind. Yeah, that's the other thing. There's no evidence of people being there at these sites. I mean, a lot of times, like that's stated in this article, a lot of these cases, the bones are broken. It's almost as though the cows were lifted up, and then they had these things done to them. They were mutilated, drained of blood, and then dropped from a height, and then they end up with broken bones. So that's... Yeah, I mean, there's no people that are going to be able to get away with doing something like this. You'd have to have a really advanced technology. Continuing, O'Brien says this. He says, it's almost impossible for an amateur to be able to duplicate these cuts, especially the taking the tongue out from deep in the esophagus and the lymph system. I just don't think Satanists have the knowledge, wherewithal, and motivation to do these things. We're not talking about kids going out cow tipping. Another popular explanation often brought up is the possibilities these mutilations could be done by extraterrestrials. Both O'Brien and Perkins believe this to be the least likely of the school of thought. Now let's just stop there. Now, so both these guys, O'Brien and Perkins, are stating that this is the extraterrestrial explanation, right? That's the least likely. That's the most likely. It is what's going on. That's what is going on. There is no other explanation. Why wouldn't it be that? That's what it is. It's just because of the situation, because again, the stigma associated with this, these people don't want to say that. I mean, I could imagine. I believe this. I believe there are people out there. I'm not saying these guys, right? But they could be. They probably know that it is in their minds. They probably believe that it is aliens, but they don't want to say it publicly because they're afraid of what other people will think and say about them. That's... Again, it's just so silly. I mean, when it's obvious what's going on here, right? It's just absolutely obvious what's been. I mean, there's been people that have ranchers that have stayed out at night who have been dealing with this issue, and the next thing you know, some of them see the lights, and then within minutes it happens within minutes. Sometimes a cow is completely drained of blood and mutilated. And they see strange lights. It's extraterrestrial. That's the answer. That's what's going on. Okay, O'Brien says, there are investigators who feel that's the only answer that can explain this, but it doesn't make sense to me. Well, why doesn't it make sense? It makes perfect sense. That's what it is. I mean, what else could it possibly be? It doesn't make sense. I mean, there's no predators like coyotes or wolves coming out of the woods, carrying laser equipment to make these kind of cuts, to cut the tongue out the way they're removed, or cut off the ears like they are, draining the blood like so quickly. That's not possible. Why would the government do that? Why would the government send out a team in black helicopters to do something like that? That doesn't make any sense either. I mean, if people in the government want cattle, they could get it easily, right? And do their experiments in private somewhere. They wouldn't do this. That doesn't make any sense. That makes less sense than anything, actually. So it's you rule all these things out. The satanic cults, somebody would have been caught by now. And besides, there's never been any evidence whatsoever that people were doing this. That there was no footprints of people. I mean, there's just nothing there. There's more evidence, rather, of course, of extraterrestrials. That's where the evidence is. The evidence is that it's extraterrestrial. It all points to that, because that's what it is. Of course, I'm sure sometimes there's some maniac or that does something like this, that kills a cow for no reason, but with the kind of mutilation that occurs in these cases that we're talking about here, this isn't people. It's not people. It's not predators, and it's not the government. That's crazy. Again, I believe that the black helicopters come flying in here sometimes to these cases because they're sent out because they want to see, maybe they could. Maybe they think they might be able to shoot one of these saucers down or something, or maybe they're trying to just scare them away. So maybe because they're doing this secretly, trying to scare extraterrestrials away from these ranches so they don't do these kind of things. Maybe that's what's going on, but it's not. They're not the ones doing it. That doesn't make any sense. There's no government. There doesn't make any sense for the government to be doing this. The extraterrestrial explanation is the one that makes the most sense. It makes more sense than anything else. Continuing here. However, Perkins said since the answer to this mystery is not clear at this point, extraterrestrials cannot be ruled out. No, they can't be ruled out. They have to. This has to be the number one reason. It's the number one reason for this. Probably 50% of the people I talk to in the areas where these mutilations have happened say it could be aliens, Perkins said. But from my point of view, it's a long shot. Why is it such a long shot? Because you just don't want to admit? You just don't want to admit to this reality because you're afraid what your neighbors are going to think of you? Then because that's what it is. I mean, what else is why is it such a long shot? I mean, after all this time, we have so much evidence now that it points to extraterrestrials because that seems to be the only answer, right? It is the only answer. It can't be something else. Okay, I know some people out there will say, well, it could be interdimensional. Yeah, again, I use extraterrestrial as a placeholder for the time being. But what I'm saying is that there is no other answer. I mean, the obvious answers to me, the one has to be extraterrestrials. That's what it is in my mind, as far as I'm concerned. These other things don't make any sense. The extraterrestrial one does make sense, and there could be different reasons for that. We don't know what that reason is. We could speculate on that. We'll get into that later on here. It says O'Brien believes the mutilations could have a connection to testing for mad cow disease, while Perkins brings up the possibility of testing for radiation. Now that is something we're going to talk about, yeah. At the end of the day, no one theory is a perfect fit to explain these cases, but that is one of the most intriguing aspects of these happenings. O'Brien says, I can win any debate about these mysterious cattle deaths if I'm playing the devil's advocate. No matter what you come up with as an answer, there are cases that don't fit into that particular scenario. And then here's what do the officials say? The federal government has conducted 2 independent investigations into cattle mutilations with totally different conclusions. The BATF began an investigation into the mutilations in the early 1970s to see if they could be connected to unidentified flying objects. BATF agent Donald Flickinger headed up the investigation. The findings showed no connection to UFOs, but found some cattle had been tranquilized and showed signs of being given anticoagulants prior to their deaths. The agency was unable to hold anyone responsible for the mutilations, but Flickinger later distributed a memo that has forever associated mutilations with satanic cults. Again, that's a cover. That's a cover up. That's just giving people the public lip service. That's what's called the government giving the public lip service. Just throwing out there, yeah, it's satanic cults. Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get them one of these days. That's what that is. O'Brien then says, the UFO enthusiast convinced him to write a letter and send it to all the sheriffs in the country to be on the lookout for cultists or devil worshippers who were doing the mutilations. The theory gained quite a bit of notoriety, and still to this day, people are touting that as a potential cause of these cases. Again, the Satanist, that's all nonsense. That's all nonsense. After a decade of high concentration of mutilations and pressure to explain the events, the Federal Bureau of Investigation launched Operation Animal Mutilation in New Mexico in 1979. The investigation was headed by ex-FBI agent Kenneth Rommel and determined a majority of the mutilations were predator attacks, although certain cases could not be explained. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police also disagreed with the FBI's explanation of the deaths after years of investigating mutilations in Canada. I find it difficult to understand how Rommel could make a statement such as this without ever having personally witnessed a real mutilation firsthand, said RCMP investigator Corporal Lynn Lauber. I would like to see Rommel write off our confirmed cases as due to predators. Yeah, see, again, lip service. The FBI. Okay, if you have one government official first gives lip service saying, yeah, it's Satanist, we'll catch them. All right, then you have another one saying, yeah, it's just predators, don't worry about it. Nothing you could do, But then you even have an official here from Canada saying, no. Obviously, this, what are you talking about, right? That's not what it is. Okay, continuing here. At the same time, some of the FBI report pointed to the ranchers' state of mind when attempting to explain the cases. Collective delusion has been the main go-to theory of the authorities, Perkins said. The Rommel report stated ranchers And wait, this is a mistake here. It says the Rommel report stated ranchers were so economically stressed that they lost their minds and would go out and look at a natural death and suddenly say this one's mutilated. To me, that's really insulting to the ranchers. So basically, that's another thing. So I guess some government authorities were basically, okay, so a rancher reports, yeah, look at this, my cows, it's mutilated, right? And then they're saying, oh yeah, they're just jumping to conclusions. Those ranchers are just saying that, right? They're just making that up. They're embellishing when really they're not embellishing. So the government again trying to stigmatize the whole thing. You know, don't worry about it. It's predators or it's Satanists or you know what? The rancher might be nuts. He's probably jumping to conclusions. Read too many UFO books. Regardless of who or what is causing these deaths, the financial loss for producers like Hronik is palpable. And here's what Hronik said, the rancher. He says, you figure 2 to 3% natural death loss from calving to the time you sell, but when you start having phenomenal death loss, how do you manage taking 10% out for mutilations, Hronik said. While O'Brien believes at some point data will overwhelm the strange nature of the mutilations, Perkins is unsure if the mystery of these deaths will ever be resolved. Let me just stop there. I think it's already resolved. I think it's an extraterrestrial. They're doing this. For some reason, they are doing this, right? That's what it is. I mean, there's no other explanation. That's what it is. That's the explanation that makes the most sense. It's the extraterrestrials are draining blood out of cows, right? And cutting out body parts using laser precision instruments, and that's the explanation. Why they're doing it, that's what we need to find out, right? I'd like to know why they're doing it. A lot of us out there would like to know the reason why they're doing it, but that's what's going on. We just don't know why they're doing it. Not for sure. We have some ideas, we could speculate, but that's what's going on here. Okay, continuing here. Considering how long the mystery has lingered, fear of the unknown trumps all other concerns. If an unfamiliar noise awakens you in the night, it can be transformed into a million petrifying possibilities until the moment your cat reveals itself as the perpetrator. But without an answer, these mutilations are similar to a thief in the night, anonymous, confounding, and frightening to those in their wake, and they will remain that way until answers are uncovered. Okay, again, I think the answer is uncovered. I think it's very clear what the answer is. The answer is that it's extraterrestrial. That's the answer. There is no other answer. The answer is extraterrestrials are doing this. For what reason, we could speculate about that, but that's who's doing it. It's not the government. That makes absolutely zero sense. Right? It's not the government, right? It's not predators. I mean, sometimes predators do these kind of things, right? But you could tell, when a predator does these kind of things. But predators don't use precision laser instruments to cut off ears and the sexual organs. That's just something that doesn't happen. They don't core out the anus with the laser, right? They don't do that kind of thing. And they don't just leave an animal the carcass of one of these things laying there with not an ounce of blood left inside of it. There's going to be some kind of evidence, right? When a predator does these things, you could tell, right? If a person were to do these kind of things, I'm sure you could tell with that too, right? But it's not people, it's not Satanists. That's just, again, lip service from the government. That's better, I guess, in their mind. Yeah, just watch some wild. In the government's point of view, they rather tell the public that it's a bunch of Satanists, right, than extraterrestrials. The Satan, you would think that the Satanists would actually be a little bit scarier to some people, But no, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, let me just stop here and see if there's any comments here. Okay, we'll get into this later on. All right, now I guess I want to get into let's talk about what's going on here. Why are they doing this? I mean, the answer is obvious as far as I'm concerned, right? It's there's extraterrestrials that are responsible for these very strange mutilations. The ones where the missing body parts, the drained blood. That's who's responsible for this. But what I think is, okay, now I talked in the past, that one of the possible reasons behind this was basically the aliens are basically colonizing the planet. And this was something that I told you, I talked before about this anonymous source who I have, this person who was a retired electronics engineer who used to work for government agencies like CIA, NASA, and also private weapons manufacturers. and he's now retired, this guy, and he believes that it could be a colonization program, and that they're basically, because these aliens, they're like insects, these greys and the praying mantises, they're like insects, and they need blood, because they're insects. So that's what's going on. So that's one of the things that are going on. One of the possible reasons for this, that they're draining the blood from these things because that's what they're living on. Okay, I mean, there's David Jacobs talked in the professor from Temple who hypnotized thousands of people, well over 1,000 people who were abducted by aliens, who were, while in the craft, they saw like aliens going into some, like, basically they I guess the way they intake food is through their pores somehow, and they'll go into tanks, and that's how some of these abductees have reported seeing this. So maybe the liquid that they're immersing themselves in is some sort of a blood mixture from these cattle. I mean, that's possible. There are people out there also who believe that that maybe because cow blood is really close to human blood, and maybe they're using that in their hybridization program. As you know, there's it's speculated that there's a hybridization program ongoing, and that these beings are mixing human and alien DNA and creating things that look just like humans but are part alien and could have the same kind of abilities as aliens, and maybe they're using the blood from these cattle for something like that. But I just want to, and that could be, but it should also be pointed out that it's not just cattle. There's a lot of different kind of animals that have been found in this condition, in this strange condition. I mean, again, the very first well-known one was a horse, right? And then, of course, there's mostly, for the most part, it's cattle, but it's all kinds of animals, rabbits, deer, all kinds of animals in the wild. We just don't know about the ones in the wild because, you have to come across one. I mean, it's something that might not be on a ranch, too, sometimes. So we don't know the extent of this for a lot of different reasons, because some of these animals that are mutilated, I'm sure, are in the wild, right? And nobody ever knows about it. Nobody ever sees them. And, of course, there's probably a lot of ranchers, like these investigators said, who never report it because of the stigma. They don't want to deal with it, so they just move on with life without telling anybody. So we don't know the extent of it. It's probably pretty big. But that could be one of the reasons. It could be that they're using this for food, right? And there's also some people who believe that it could be that maybe we're a food source too. There's been cases of human mutilation where there's been certain cases where bodies of human beings sometimes turn up in this condition, right? In this grisly condition. So that's possible too. But now there are other people who think that they're testing them, that there's some researchers out there who firmly believe, and I've never really talked about this, but I'll talk about it now. There are some people who actually firmly believe that, hold on, I'll make this a little bit bigger here. There are some people who believe that that they're doing it they're testing them because of because we use like some of these places, some of these ranches were like downwind of where nuclear bombs were tested and things like that. So they're testing them to see what's going on. That maybe they're trying to determine if our nuclear any of the nuclear bombs that we detonated or any of the nuclear power plants that we use, right, is affecting the animals, and maybe that's what they're doing. There's a lot of people firmly believe that, and I guess there could be something to that too. I mean, maybe that would be a reason. I mean, it seems like it seems that the aliens do seem sometimes to have a concern about the future of this planet. I mean, when you look at all these different cases, a lot of different abductees will say that a lot of the aliens express a concern about the future of the planet, about what's going to happen, in the future, and express concern about our technology. I think about the Ariel School incident where, some of these kids who, of course, the Ariel School incident, broad daylight, in September of 1994, a flying saucer lands outside of a school, the Ariel School in Zimbabwe, right, while a bunch of kids are out on a recess. Right, a flying saucer lands. Some alien beings exit the craft, and one of them communicates telepathically with a handful of these kids, and they put messages in their brains telepathically, stating that, this this technology is not good, and they're showing them images of destruction and disaster, and there was a concern expressed by these beings that that what we're doing is not good, right? And that could be it too. Maybe all these years, maybe that's the reason. So that's why they're testing these animals to see if there's been any kind of ill effects from the nuclear fallout that might be still floating around. That could be it. So that's one of the reasons too. But we just don't know. We could speculate all we want, but I think that the answer, most certainly, right? The answer has to certainly be that it's extraterrestrials doing this. We just don't know why. We have no idea why. Right? We can speculate all we want, right? And tomorrow I might wake up and might believe, well, you know what? I think they're colonizing the planet, and yeah, they're doing it for food. I mean, aliens got to eat too. That makes sense, right? That could be that. Or yeah, I mean, they're concerned about the future of the planet, and maybe they're just doing tests on these animals to see if there's any kind of if they have any sort of changes in their systems because of nuclear fallout. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that could be it. I don't know, maybe, but hey, there's a hybridization program going on. They're trying to create these alien hybrids and that look just like humans, and the cow blood's pretty much just like human blood. So yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of different things that make sense or could make sense, or it could be some reason that is beyond our comprehension. But there's some reason they're doing it. Well, we can't say what that is, but I think it's easy to say that's what it is, that they are extraterrestrials that are doing this. It has to be. Okay, let's look at any kind of comments that I've received here. Okay, made it. Lord Humongous says, hey, I caught you live for once. Jesse Vivera says, any good alien movie recommendations? Any good alien movie recommendations? Let's see, I don't know. Trying to think offhand here. Well, the movies I've watched recently, I watched Aerial Phenomenon. Yeah, I actually bought that one. I think I talked about that one before. I watched that James Fox movie, that recent one about the Virginia case. That was a good one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been watching a lot of different things lately, and I've been watching a lot of what do you call it? Preston Dennett videos. I've been watching a lot of. I think I watched almost every single video that guy has. He has a great YouTube channel. In fact, I've been talking about his videos recently a lot. I watched a lot of his videos. I don't know. I would recommend, again, Preston Dennett's YouTube channel. He has a lot of good stuff on there. A lot of very interesting cases to talk that he talks about. A lot of them that you never hear before. In fact, the recent video that he did on Independence Day sightings is really something I never knew. Very interesting stuff. That basically most UFO sightings are seen on the 4th of July. That happen on the 4th of July. Okay, then Lord Humongous says, the scary part, if you read David Jacobs, is that he thinks they have colonized other planets and we don't stand a chance if that is what they're doing. Yeah. I mean, if that's what's going on, if this cattle mutilation is just because they're here and they need food and they're because they're like insects and they drink blood and they're colonizing us slowly but surely. Yeah, I mean, it could be, and what's the purpose of the hybrids then too? I mean, could the hybrids be they create these beings that look just like us, or actually the ones that look really like us, according to Jacobs, are they're beyond hybrids, they're hybrids, he calls them. I mean, are they going to be put into action at some point in the future? Right? I don't know. I mean, it's very scary to think about, but yeah, I mean, yeah. So it is scary, that whole idea that they could be colonizing us. But and I guess it could take a long time. Maybe a certain amount of them showed up at some point. It seems like there's always been a presence here. I mean, you look through history, right? You look like even back in the Roman times, there was sightings. I mean, there was sightings throughout the centuries here and there. But it really picked up in 1947, which coincidentally is only a couple of years after the first atomic bomb blast, and it seemed like they were really hanging around New Mexico. It seems like there's a lot of sightings in New Mexico, even to this day. And that's where Roswell happened, of course, the Roswell crash, New Mexico. So yeah, I mean, if that's what it seems like they showed up in force somewhat in 47. I've talked about this before, and that they're that's what it could be. It could be that they're setting things up for some future, project where they just all suddenly take over. Maybe, I mean, if these things the way they can control people, the abilities that they have, right, it's beyond anything that we have. I mean, I think about my experience. I talk about the experience I had when I was a kid all the time. I'm laying in bed, and there's something standing by my bed that's not human. I'm trying to wake up everyone in the house, right? Screaming my head off at the top of my lungs. Of course, there's that humming sound ongoing the whole time. But somehow everybody they were conked out. I mean, they would not budge. I mean, I'm screaming right directly toward my brother Davey, who's only, 6-7 feet away from me. Right, his face is right toward me, and he didn't budge. I'm screaming my head off toward him, and he's not waking up. I'm screaming for my mom and dad, whose bedroom was basically right below my room. They're not coming. Right? Somehow they're able to knock a whole an entire household out. I mean, they have all kinds of abilities. I mean, there's people that say some abductees, people that know that they're abducted on a regular basis, they could be standing in the kitchen in the middle of a conversation and then all of a sudden lose a half hour of time and then continue the conversation they were having like nothing happened and then not realize it right away. It might take them days or maybe never. Some people probably never even know when things like this happen. These beings have a power over us that's It defies comprehension. It's just beyond anything we could even imagine. So, if that's what this is, if this is a takeover, then I don't think we would have a chance. If that's what it is, if this is a colonization, I would think that we don't have a chance. Okay. Well, I guess that's going to be. I'm going to close it up here. I'm going to make this one an early one tonight. I'm sorry I had technical difficulties earlier when I went to start this. For some reason, I couldn't get it to go live, and then. So I had to basically shut everything down and then reboot it, and then it worked. So until next time, thank you everyone for joining and participating. I really appreciate it. And so until next time.